Before the week ends, Ethan will realize the elite dating app he joined by accident did not just match him with a stranger, it matched him with the one woman who can change his life or ruin it. Ethan Carter did not download the app because he was looking for love, not the way people imagine it, with confidence and a clean plan. He downloaded it at 12:47 a.m., with one eye half open, sitting at his small kitchen table while the dishwasher hummed in the background and a lunchbox sat unwashed in the sink. Mia's homework was spread out beside his laptop, the pencil marks messy and innocent, and Ethan felt the familiar ache of being the only adult in the house who had to keep everything moving. Jordan, his buddy from the new job, had been texting him for days, telling him he needed to get back out there, and that there was a private app where serious people met, where nobody wasted your time, where you could finally meet someone who understood ambition and stability. Ethan thought Jordan meant networking, some career thing with mentors and connections, maybe a way to get his foot in the door at his new company without begging for favors. That sounded harmless. He clicked the link, put in his email, and within minutes he realized he had walked into a different world. The sign-up asked for a verification selfie, a job title, and the kind of details that felt too personal for a Tuesday night. Profiles popped up like magazine covers, people posing in suits on rooftops, people leaning against sports cars, people standing in front of private jets with smiles that looked expensive. Ethan almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt ridiculous next to his reality, which was budgeting groceries, stretching a paycheck, and trying not to let his daughter see how tired he was. He told himself he would delete the app right away, that he had no business here, that this was for people who had time to be glamorous and unattached. But he kept scrolling, not out of hope exactly, more like a strange curiosity, the kind that comes when you've been alone long enough that even other people's lives start to feel unreal. He passed profile after profile, all polished and perfect, until one stopped him cold. Clara Vaughn. The name was simple. The pictures were calm, not showy. No yacht, no staged champagne smile. One photo looked like it was taken on a quiet street outside a bookstore, another in a plain office with warm light, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and late nights. Her bio was short, almost blunt. No flirting, no jokes, just a few lines about honesty, boundaries, and being tired of people who performed a personality to get what they wanted. Ethan felt his shoulders loosen, just a little. He didn't know why, but it was the first profile that didn't make him feel like an outsider. He hovered over the screen, thumb stuck between swiping away and swiping right, because swiping right felt like stepping onto a stage he never auditioned for. He thought about Mia asleep down the hall, her hair spread over her pillow, her small hand curled around the stuffed animal she insisted she was too old to need. He thought about the kind of man he wanted her to grow up seeing, not someone desperate, not someone who chased attention, but someone who still believed life could hold something gentle. Ethan swiped right fast, like ripping off a bandage, then immediately regretted it. He tossed the phone onto the table and went to bed telling himself it didn't matter, that she would never see him anyway. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed against the wood, loud in the quiet apartment. Ethan stared at the screen, heart tapping hard in his chest. It was a match, and beneath her name, a message appeared that was even more unsettling than the match itself. "You seem real. Are you?" Ethan stared at the message for a long time, unsure what to type back. "You seem real. Are you?" It was such a strange question, but somehow it made perfect sense. Everyone else on that app looked airbrushed and untouchable, but Clara's words felt like someone pulling him into an honest conversation. He typed, erased, and retyped 3 times before finally replying, "As real as a guy making peanut butter sandwiches at midnight." A moment later, her reply appeared. "That sounds more honest than most dinner invitations I get." It made him smile, small and tired, but genuine. That night they talked for almost an hour, not about love or romance, but about life, work, and what it means to start over when you didn't plan to. Clara told him she didn't like people who played games or exaggerated their lives. Ethan told her he didn't have time to pretend. He mentioned his daughter, Mia, and waited for the usual awkward silence, the one that always came when people realized he came as a package deal. But Clara didn't disappear. Instead, she asked, "What's your favorite breakfast?" He was caught off guard by that question. "Chocolate chip pancakes," he wrote. "She thinks that's how weekends are supposed to start." Clara replied, "She's right. Some things are worth keeping as rules." It was simple, but it hit him harder than he expected. They talked again the next night, and the one after that. Ethan learned that Clara had built her career from the ground up, and that people admired her for being disciplined, not for being warm. She said people respected her decisions, but never asked if she was happy. Ethan found that strange because he could feel something in her words, a quiet kind of sadness that matched his own. "Being needed isn't the same as being seen," she wrote one night, and Ethan didn't know why that line stuck in his head, but it did. He thought about it while brushing Mia's hair in the morning, while walking to the bus stop, and while sitting at his new desk where everything smelled like fresh paint and coffee. The following Monday, he was still thinking about that line when he walked into the company auditorium for orientation. The room buzzed with new employees whispering, holding folders, and trying to look confident. Ethan took a seat near the back, his shirt a little wrinkled, his tie slightly crooked, his stomach filled with nervous energy. The lights dimmed and a woman's voice came over the microphone, calm, steady, commanding without being loud. Ethan looked up, and for a few seconds his world tilted. On stage stood Clara Vaughn, same posture, same eyes, the same woman who had asked if he was real. She was introducing herself as the CEO of the company. Ethan's heart pounded as he sat frozen in his seat, every sound around him fading. Clara didn't seem to notice him at first, but then their eyes met. It was only for a moment, but that moment stretched long enough for him to know she recognized him too. When the meeting ended, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a message from her. 3 words that would change everything. "At work, we're strangers." He stared at the screen, unsure if he should reply, unsure if this was a warning or a mercy. All he knew was that his life had just become a lot more complicated, and he couldn't tell anyone, not even himself, what he wanted to happen next. Ethan tried to act normal the rest of that day, but his body refused to cooperate. Every time he stood up from his chair, his legs felt slightly unsteady, like the floor was moving under him. He kept hearing Clara's voice from the stage, calm and controlled, and then seeing her late-night messages in his mind, direct and quietly human. It was like 2 versions of the same person were colliding in his head, and he didn't know which one was real, or if both were. After orientation, everyone rushed into smaller groups for onboarding, exchanging introductions and laughing too loudly at safe jokes. Ethan played along when he had to, nodding, smiling, repeating his name, but inside he was counting minutes until he could get away. His phone stayed face down on the desk, as if looking at it might make the situation worse. When he finally checked it in a hallway outside the training rooms, he saw her message again. "At work, we're strangers." He typed back, "Understood," and pressed send before he could overthink it. The reply came quickly. "Thank you. This protects you too." That last part surprised him because it sounded less like a command and more like a warning. Ethan slipped the phone into his pocket and walked back in, telling himself he could handle this. He'd handled worse. He'd handled grief, hospital halls, paperwork that felt endless, and the long nights when Mia cried for her mom and he had nothing to offer except his arms and his own broken promises. This was just awkward, he told himself. Just a weird coincidence. But awkward didn't cover it once real work began. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed how the building seemed to orbit around Clara. People straightened their posture when her name was mentioned. Meetings started on time when her calendar was involved. Even the air felt different on the executive floor, quieter and colder, like emotions weren't allowed there. Ethan kept his head down, learning systems, finishing tasks early, and trying not to stand out. Still, he felt a strange pull whenever he saw her from a distance, like his mind was searching for proof that she really was the same woman who asked him about Mia's favorite breakfast. On the 3rd day, he was called into his manager's office and told he'd been selected for a high-priority project because he had experience with the exact kind of operational cleanup they needed. Ethan should have been proud, but his stomach tightened when he heard the details. The project was under Clara's division. It wasn't a direct line to her, they said, but it was close enough that her team would review key decisions. He nodded like it was no big deal, because refusing would raise questions, and he couldn't afford to look difficult in his first week. That evening, after Mia fell asleep, Ethan sat at the same kitchen table and opened the app, unsure if he even wanted to see her name again. Clara had already messaged, "Did you start today?" He stared at the words, then replied carefully, "Yes, orientation." A pause, then, "I saw you." Ethan's chest tightened. He typed, "I saw you too." Clara wrote back, "This is going to be complicated." He almost laughed at how calm she sounded, like complicated was just another scheduling issue. Ethan responded, "I didn't plan this." Her reply came slower this time. "Neither did I." Then, after another pause, "But if we do this wrong, it won't only hurt us." He stared at that line, thinking of Mia, thinking of rent, thinking of how one rumor could turn into a reason to fire him. He typed, "Then we don't do it wrong. We keep it clean, professional." Clara answered, "Good, and on this app, we speak carefully." Ethan wanted to tell her that he didn't know how to speak carefully when he finally felt seen, but he didn't. Instead, he wrote, "Okay." He told himself that was the smart choice. Still, as he turned off the light and walked down the hallway, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just fear, not just stress, something else underneath it, dangerous and alive. Hope. The next week moved fast, the way things do when you're trying to prove yourself and also trying not to fall apart. Ethan threw himself into the project like it was a life raft. He arrived early, stayed late, took notes like his job depended on every detail, because in a way, it did. The project was messy, full of old data, missed deadlines, and people blaming each other instead of fixing anything. Ethan did what he always did when life got chaotic. He got quiet, focused, and started untangling the problem one piece at a time. He didn't chase attention, didn't try to be the hero, he simply did the work. That should have made everything simple, but it didn't, because Clara was suddenly everywhere in the background. Her name was attached to approvals, her standards shaped the meetings, her leadership was felt even when she wasn't in the room. Then, on Wednesday, she did walk into the room. Not with drama, not with a grand entrance, just a clean stride and a calm expression that made everyone sit up straighter. Ethan kept his eyes on his laptop, pretending he was reading a report, but he could feel her presence like heat. She greeted the team, listened for a few minutes, then asked a question that cut straight through the confusion. It wasn't rude, it was sharp, clear, the kind of question that exposed who understood the work and who was hiding behind noise. Ethan answered without thinking because it was his job to answer. He spoke simply, explaining what he'd found and what the next steps needed to be. The room went still. Then a few people nodded, almost relieved. Clara looked at him for a second longer than she needed to, then said, "Good, proceed." That was it. No hint, no softness, no private recognition, just the CEO approving his plan like he was any other employee. Ethan should have felt proud. Instead, he felt strangely hollow, like he'd just spoken to a locked door. That night, the app lit up while he was rinsing Mia's dinner plate. "You were prepared," Clara messaged. Ethan stared at the screen and felt the tension in his shoulders ease for the first time all day. "I didn't want to waste anyone's time," he replied. Clara answered, "You didn't." Then, after a pause, "Most people talk to impress. You talk to solve." Ethan leaned back against the counter, the kitchen light buzzing softly above him. "I don't know how to impress," he typed. "I'm out of practice." Clara's reply came quick, like she'd been waiting for honesty. "Good. Don't practice. It's exhausting." He almost laughed, but it came out as a quiet breath. For a while, they talked the way they always did on the app. Careful, but real, like two people speaking through a door that was slightly cracked open. Clara admitted she hated the way everyone assumed she had it all together, just because she wore confidence well. Ethan admitted he felt like he'd become a shadow of himself since losing the life he thought he was building. Neither of them used big words, neither of them tried to turn it into romance, but the warmth was there anyway, growing in the small spaces between their sentences. It got complicated the moment Mia wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, wearing her pajamas with tiny stars. "Dad?" she mumbled, half asleep. Ethan covered the phone screen instinctively, like he'd been caught doing something wrong, and he hated that feeling. He scooped Mia up and carried her to the couch, whispering that everything was okay. Mia's head rested against his shoulder, heavy with sleep. The phone buzzed again. Ethan glanced down and saw a new message from Clara. "Is that her?" Ethan hesitated, then lifted the phone slightly. Mia blinked at the screen, confused, then offered a tiny wave, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Clara didn't speak, but Ethan saw her face on the video call, softer than he'd ever seen at work, her eyes warm in a way that surprised him. Mia whispered, "Hi," and Clara whispered, "Hi, Mia." It was only a few seconds before Ethan ended the call because he didn't want to push it, didn't want to risk anything. But after Mia fell asleep again, Ethan sat alone in the quiet living room and realized something had shifted. Clara wasn't just a profile anymore. She wasn't just his CEO either. She was someone who had just looked at his daughter and didn't flinch. And for a single dad who had spent years watching people quietly step away, that meant more than he was ready to admit. Ethan noticed the change before anyone said a word, because workplaces never announce when they start turning on you. It begins with a look held a little too long, a conversation that quiets when you walk by, a teammate suddenly forgetting to include you on an email thread. After Clara's brief visit to the project meeting, people started paying closer attention to Ethan, not in the supportive way, but in the curious, suspicious way that makes your skin feel tight. He tried to ignore it. He told himself it was normal for a new hire to be watched, that the project was high profile, that everyone wanted to look good. Still, the tension followed him down hallways. One afternoon, he stayed late to finish a cleanup report before the next morning's review. When he finally stepped out of a conference room on the executive floor, he saw two employees near the elevator glance at him and then at each other. It was subtle, but it landed like a punch. On the ride down, he stared at his reflection in the brushed metal wall and felt that familiar old pressure of needing to prove he belonged, needing to work twice as hard just to be seen as neutral. At home, Mia was at the table coloring, humming to herself, and Ethan tried to keep his face calm as he warmed up leftovers. His phone buzzed with a message from Clara. "Long day?" Ethan typed, "Just work," and meant it, but his hands shook slightly as he held the phone. Clara replied, "Be careful. People notice patterns." Ethan stared at that sentence. "Are you warning me?" he wrote. Clara's response came after a pause. "I'm warning both of us." The next morning, HR invited him to a quick check-in. The phrase sounded friendly, but the room didn't. The HR rep smiled too politely and asked questions that were framed as normal onboarding but felt like fishing hooks. How was he settling in? Did he feel supported? Had anyone given him special access to leadership? Ethan answered carefully, keeping his voice steady, but his heart thudded harder with each question. He walked out with his jaw tight and his mind racing. He didn't want this. He hadn't asked for it. He had joined the app by mistake, had talked to Clara as a person before he knew she was a title, and now he could already see the story people would tell about him. Single dad matches with wealthy CEO. New hire gets noticed fast. Must be after money. Must be after power. That story would spread because it was easy. It was entertaining. It didn't require anyone to look at his actual life, his actual exhaustion, the fact that he didn't even have the energy to chase anything beyond getting Mia to school on time. That night, Ethan opened the app and stared at Clara's name, and for the first time, he didn't feel comfort. He felt risk. Clara messaged, "Did something happen today?" Ethan hesitated, then typed, "HR talked to me." The typing bubble appeared, vanished, appeared again on her side. Finally, she wrote, "I can handle this." Ethan felt anger flare up, sharp and bitter. That's the problem. You can handle it because you're you. I don't get to handle it. I get fired. Another pause. Clara wrote, "I won't let that happen." Ethan stared at those words and felt his throat tighten. He wanted to believe her, but belief was expensive. He had learned that the hard way. Without thinking too much, he wrote, "Then stop. We stop talking. We stop everything." The moment he sent it, his stomach dropped. A long silence followed. Then Clara replied with one line that felt colder than the rest of the room at work. "If that's what you want." Ethan didn't answer. He put the phone face down and went to clean the kitchen as if scrubbing counters could scrub away what he felt. Later, Mia found him sitting in the living room with the lights off, not sleeping, just staring. She climbed onto the couch and leaned against him. "You're doing that thing," she said softly. Ethan blinked. "What thing?" Mia shrugged. "The thing where you pretend you don't care." Ethan swallowed hard. "I do care," he admitted, voice low. Mia looked up at him, her expression too serious for her age. "Then don't act like you don't," she whispered. Ethan pulled her close, and in that quiet moment he realized the real damage wasn't the rumors or HR questions. The real damage was what he was teaching his daughter, that when something matters, you run from it before it can hurt you. Ethan didn't sleep much after that. and by morning he felt like he'd swallowed a stone. He moved through the routine on autopilot, making Mia's breakfast, checking her backpack, tying her shoelaces when she got distracted, smiling when she smiled. But the quiet in his chest was heavy, because the app stayed silent, and he kept replaying his last message to Clara like a mistake he couldn't undo. At work, the atmosphere felt tighter than usual. People were polite, but he could sense the invisible line he'd stepped near, the one that turned you into a story. Around noon, his manager told him the project review had been moved up, and Clara wanted a smaller meeting with only key people. Ethan's stomach dropped again. He walked to the conference room with his notes in hand and his mind racing, prepared for a reprimand he hadn't earned. When he entered, Clara was already there with Nina and one other executive. Clara didn't look angry. She looked tired in a controlled way, like someone who had spent all morning choosing discipline over emotion. Nina's eyes were sharp, scanning Ethan as if she expected him to slip. The meeting started strictly business, and Ethan kept his voice steady as he presented the cleanup plan and the results from the last week. Clara asked questions, but they were fair, focused on the work. When it ended, the other executive left first, then Nina stood like she wanted to stay, but Clara said calmly, "Give us 2 minutes." Nina hesitated, then walked out, not happy about it. The door clicked shut, and for the first time, Ethan and Clara were alone in the same room with no audience. The silence was different from the app silence. It was physical, real, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Ethan broke first. "I'm not doing this to get ahead," he said quietly. "I'm not here for your money or your name. I'm here because my daughter needs stability." Clara's eyes stayed on him, steady. "I know," she said. Ethan's throat tightened. "Then why does it feel like I'm the one who has to pay for this?" Clara exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. "Because you're the one with more to lose," she admitted. The honesty hit him harder than any accusation. Ethan nodded once, like that confirmed what he already feared. "I can't be your secret," he said quietly. "And I can't be a rumor. Mia doesn't deserve that. I don't deserve that." Clara's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. "You're right," she said, "and that's why I'm fixing it today." Ethan blinked. Fixing what? Clara stepped closer to the table, not toward him, but toward the documents she had prepared. "I'm removing you from my chain of review. You'll report to a different director starting immediately. It'll be documented properly and approved. No back doors, no favoritism." Ethan stared at her, surprised. "That could look like you're protecting me," he said. Clara nodded. "It is protecting you," she replied, "and it's protecting the company. People can whisper all they want, but the structure will be clean." Ethan swallowed. "And what about you?" Clara's mouth tightened for a second, then she said, "I will handle my side. I've spent too long letting other people's assumptions control my life." That evening, Ethan got a message on the app, but it wasn't from Clara. It was an email from HR confirming his reassignment, formal and clear, like a door closing on the rumor before it could grow teeth. Then, an hour later, Clara finally messaged him. "I'm sorry I went cold. I was trying to protect you the wrong way." Ethan stared at the words, then typed back, "I was scared." Clara replied, "So was I." Ethan hesitated before sending the next line, because it felt like stepping off a cliff, but Mia's voice from the night before echoed in his head. "Don't act like you don't care." Ethan wrote, "I care, but I need it to be real." Clara's answer came quickly. "Then let it be real. Not secret, not rushed, real." 2 days later, their first actual date wasn't in a fancy restaurant or an exclusive lounge. It was a small park near Ethan's apartment, late afternoon sunlight, Mia riding with Scooter in circles while Ethan and Clara walked slowly behind her. Clara didn't dress to impress. Ethan didn't try to be impressive. They just talked like normal people. And for the first time since this all started, Ethan felt something unclench inside him. When Mia skated back and slipped her small hand into Clara's without being told, Ethan's breath caught, not because it solved everything, but because it proved something. This wasn't an escape from real life. This was real life, finally making room for them. If you enjoy realistic, emotional stories with twists and heart, subscribe to Drew Daily Stories and share this video with someone who loves slow burn romance and powerful lessons.